Welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast, where we explore the stories, strategies, and insights of thought leaders who inspire us to think differently and lead better. Through candid conversations and expert perspectives, we dive into the challenges, breakthroughs, and practical lessons that shape exceptional leadership. This conversation is centered on Show Her the Money and Wendy Ryan's groundbreaking documentary and book that serves as both a rallying cry and a practical guide for closing the gender gap in venture capital. This project goes beyond exposing the stark statistic that women receive only 2% of all venture capital funding. It shines a light on the untapped innovation, resilience, and economic potential women bring to entrepreneurship. Through real stories, actionable strategies, and compelling facts, Show Her the Money invites every person, founder, investor, and ally to play a more active role in building a more equitable and prosperous future, where women's ideas and businesses are not just welcomed, but they're truly funded and championed. Welcome to the program, Wendy.
Hi, Charles. Great to be here with you.
Well, let's begin with the origins of your involvement in this powerful documentary and movement. What inspired you to participate in and be the executive producer on Show Her the Money?
Well, the inspiration for my involvement was really years in the making. I started angel investing in 2018, and I met a couple years after that, I met Catherine Gray, who's our producer with a capital P, and it was her vision and her baby, the documentary. I met her. We were both speaking at a women's event. We were both panelists. And she said, I'm working on this documentary about investing in women. I don't know if you'd be interested. And I said, wow, I've never invested in a documentary before. I'm not from the entertainment industry. It's not something I know about. But as soon as I heard the premise and the mission of what she was trying to achieve with it, I thought, I'm in. I have to do that. It's so mission aligned for me and what I care about.
And the intended impact really is to inspire women to dream bigger, equip allies with tools to help, and present a blueprint for societal and economic transformation. And this question of privilege is really woven throughout your story. You discuss the intersection of privilege, generational wealth, and responsibility in your journey as an angel investor. How does recognizing privilege change the way someone approaches investing or entrepreneurship?
Yeah, well, that word privilege is a very triggering one for a lot of people. And so I always have to acknowledge that up front. I think when I talk about privilege, the way that it has informed my life and my decision making and my investing is to just recognize that capital is a resource, just like water, air, anything else. And the fact is that it wasn't ever set up to be distributed equally. And I think that sort of blows people's minds. Initially, they say, what do you mean? And I say, well, the people that sort of set up our modern banking and capital system and started the venture capital industry, their vision wasn't, how do we get the most capital to the most people with the best ideas? It was, how do we make money, as much money as possible, as quickly as possible, with the least amount of effort as possible? And so it wasn't ever designed to be a system that ensured equity or be based on merit. It was based on those values. So now we're in a time where we see that we have more people that have been educated than ever before, and we have more capital than we've ever had before. And yet, and we have incredible talent all over the world that is innovating every day, that is recognizing problems, solving problems, coming up with ideas that could become great businesses, that could really transform a neighborhood, a community, a region. And there is a real mismatch between the flow and availability of capital to match really the significance of that talent and those opportunities. So I think that what we really try to do with the film is, first of all, educate people, because most people don't know what venture capital is. If they've ever heard of it, they don't really understand it. And we wanted to do it in a really engaging and storytelling way, because that's what we'd all rather watch. I don't want to watch a 90-minute documentary that's full of spreadsheets and charts and somebody standing there and lecturing, here are the principles of economics. Like, that's why we go to college and take economics classes. So we said, how else do we engage people in this and understand that when you invest in this asset class, which is when you put private capital, you put your money to work to fund private companies, you can actually impact things that you care about directly and much more quickly and efficiently often than by, say, donating to a charity.
Great insight there. And recognizing privilege, you're right, leads to more values driven, impact focused investing or entrepreneurship. It also prompts people to leverage their advantage for systemic good. And I think it shifts the definition of legacy from personal success to a community uplift, which is what it was really designed to be and has so much greater impact as a result. What I love about the movement is that it doesn't require you to fit in a certain role or have enough capital to be one of these investors. The movement takes in anyone wherever they're at that wants to continue and support this movement moving forward. How has your role as an angel investor evolved since the release of Show Her the Money and the latest book that came out that really unpacks the different types of roles within this movement?
Yeah, well, thank you for mentioning the book. The documentary came out in 2023, and it was exclusively screening at film festivals and nominated for a ton of awards. It's a great film, and I am really grateful that it turned out that way. You never know when you're making that initial investment. You're sort of hoping that all of the magic will combine in a way that it'll be great, and it is a truly a great film. And the book was just released this month, and it was really an attempt to say both the people that were in front of the camera, like myself in the film and who invested in the film, but also people that maybe were engaged in a quieter way. You didn't see them on screen, but they still had either an investment into helping the film get made or making important connections for us. You really just get to know more the people behind the film and see all of the richness and the life experience and the passion and the grit. I mean, everyone I think involved in the film, we've all had our own challenges to overcome if they weren't financial. In my case, not financial, and other people's also financial, to get to a place where they could make this investment. It's really, really inspiring. And I think you can learn a lot just from reading those stories and experiencing it in a different way.
Some very compelling stories in the book. I love the book. It really centers on building ecosystems and knowledge sharing networks as it does on individual investments, but really allows you to learn more about these individuals and humanizes them.
Yeah. And you asked Charles how it might have impacted my own investing. And I will say profoundly, in the sense that I was already actively investing in women-led companies and BIPOC and LGBTQ-led companies for, again, the reason that they're often overlooked, yet they outperform their male-led counterparts. So to me, that's like white space, opportunity, blue ocean, however we want to describe that. I was like, from a purely financial standpoint, it's very compelling that you would look at those more overlooked founders. But I think what the film really transformed for me is, well, first of all, when I came on initially as an investor in the film, I was not planning to be in front of the camera. That was a later decision and invitation. They said, well, your story is pretty compelling, and we think that it could really help other people to see themselves in the film. You kind of represent a lot of people we're trying to reach. I said, okay. I mean, it terrified me. I was like, I do not want to be in front of the camera. I'm not a media person. I'm used to being behind the scenes, that kind of thing, all the things. But I did it because I try to live out a growth mindset. And what has been really transformative is when we screen the film and then we have a panel discussion afterward, which we often do, and then we try to meet as many people in the audience as we can, because we know that particularly for people who have never invested before, it's very intimidating. And so we try to lower that intimidation factor by just showing up as real humans. Like, hey, yes, you saw me on the big screen, but you can also just come in, we can just have a candid conversation. And what I was really astonished by is that my decision to be willing to be filmed and share my story has inspired a lot of women who were similarly situated. So they had an inheritance, And they said, you know, because of seeing the film and your story specifically, Wendy, I'm going to take that $300,000 that I was going to just donate over here, and I'm actually going to invest in 3 different venture funds. And I was like blown away. I was like, wow, like this works. Like film actually does change culture and decisions, and this is amazing. And it's, again, it's not to take away from those charities. I mean, I've done a lot of philanthropy. I continue to do it. It's the both and. It's recognizing that the more layers we go through to impact a problem, let's say curing cancer, wonderful if you donate to the American Cancer Association. And I would never tell people don't do that. But what I would say is recognize that every time you hand off, you know, money to an intermediary, it adds cost, it adds time, it adds layer. So if cancer is curing cancer is something you're really passionate about, how about taking some of that money that you're donating to the ACA and instead donating it to, or not donating, but investing in a company that is actually working on curing cancer, has a novel treatment that is having trouble getting funding because they just don't fit, again, our idea of this is who starts a company that cures cancer.
Well, I'd love to go into some of the myths too, because the book really brings those out as well as the film, that women-led businesses are riskier and less profitable. In fact, just the opposite. Data shows women-founded companies outperform men by 63% in investor value creation. Also, the other big myth is the pipeline problem. There's a shortage. There's no shortage of talented women, only a lack of access to capital and networks, which the movement hopefully aims to solve.
I think those are such important data points that you bring forward. Women, what I would add to that is women are more capital efficient. So when I say this in the film, when you write a woman a $10,000 check, she actually goes further with that money than a similarly situated male would. And that's supported by a lot of good data, multiple sources. So we have this idea, and women unfortunately are often taught in society and culture that we are not good with money, that we are, you know, spendthrifts, that we're just out, we know how to shop, we know how to this and that, but we're not seen as being creative, being really efficient, really mindful. And what we find with female entrepreneurs is partly as a function of the fact that they have less access to begin with and they have to go further with that money, and partly because of the fact that they're just looking at things from a lot of different angles and creatively, they are much more efficient. And the other thing is they're exiting at higher multiples. So what that means as an investor, again, is that my money goes further. And it's so contrary to, again, the sort of perceived status quo that we're living in, that it's unfortunate because we're not necessarily always funding the best horses. We're not betting on the best horses, if you want to think of it that way.
That's a critical distinction to make. You're right. Well, let's highlight a personal story or lesson from the book that demonstrates these themes. So without giving too much away, can you highlight perhaps one story from the book that you believe will most inspire and empower women founders?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. Everyone's story, when I read through them in the book, and these are people I've gotten to know and have become good friends and are just wonderful humans to every single one. But really reading the book, the gift for me in that was learning new things about each person, and some of which I didn't know. And I think one of the things that really struck me, for example, was Sherry Deutschman's story, and how, you know, she was told at one point, hey, by a male boss, hey, you don't know anything about business. She grew up poor. She was cleaning gas station bathrooms. And her response to that, rather than sort of taking it in and saying, oh yeah, he's right, I just need to keep cleaning bathrooms. And again, no shame in that. There's always dignity in every work, but it wasn't what Sherry aspired to do forever. And so she went out, she took that feedback and said, you know what, I'm going to start my own business and I'm going to compete with him. And she competed so well and was so successful in doing that she grew it to $40 million, and she sold it years later at a huge profit. Not everyone's going to go be a Sherry and start their own business and have that kind of success, but it's the idea that when someone tells us something, I was told multiple times, you're too nice to be in business, or kind of similar to Sherry, you'll never make it in business because you're too nice. Anytime we get feedback that sort of says you don't have what it takes to succeed here in this arena, we need to pause and challenge that and say, what's an alternative explanation? I don't have to take that in and say that is true about me. No, that's one person's opinion. And their opinion may be shaped by a lot of different things that have nothing to do with me. So to me, that's the really powerful message in the book that I want to make sure also gets through to your listeners. Let's be choosy about what we take in.
And you're right, great stories abound in this book, from your own leap in angel investing with the responsibility of legacy and privilege to Pocket Sun's co-founding SoGal Ventures as a response to being overlooked. And now she is directly funding 46 diverse companies. I love Deepa's journey as a South Asian founder who leveraged community and vulnerability to cultivate a global brand. And I could connect well with Marianne's persistence in raising $5 million over 7 years for innovative wine company. And these examples demonstrate perseverance, community support, humility, and that catalytic nature of women helping other women in these ventures.
None of us do this alone. And it's a myth that any founder stands on their own and is their own giant and knows everything and gets it all done. We're all supported by many different people, whether it's family, it's friends, it's colleagues, etc. Unfortunately, women generally don't come into the business world as an entrepreneur with the kinds of networks and accessibility that men often have. So we find things like for Black women, it costs $250,000 more on average to start a business than it does a white man. Why? Because they have to pay for legal expertise, for a lot of things that, because they don't have the network in the business world, for example. So we have to be mindful of we don't all start in the same place. And again, being able to look at each founder, see the passion, see the grit, see the strength of the business idea and the depth of the problem they're trying to solve for and the opportunity there. And when we are willing to match that with a need, it's just incredible.
Well, in both the film and the book, both feature visionary women leaders and entrepreneurs. What are some of the most significant qualities or skill sets you see across women you profile to help our listeners?
Yeah. Yes, that's so often the case. I don't know why we as a society have cultivated this view that we have to choose one or the other. And I think that's to our detriment.
Well, finally, let's close with how everyone can play a part, no matter their background or bank balance. And you describe both the film and the book as more of a collection of stories. It's a call to action and a movement for women and allies. What does this movement look like in practical terms, and how can someone become part of it, regardless of their resources?
Well, the great news is that just in the last couple of years, there have been many more avenues that have opened up for people to be able to make an impact on, again, things that they care about. And I advocate for people considering investing as a primary mechanism for doing that. I think, I shared the example earlier of how if you're a woman in corporate America, you can probably open doors for a lot of other women entrepreneurs if you're intentional and you're willing to do that. The other thing all of us can do is we can be very mindful consumers and purchasers. So we can choose to purchase from women-led companies. When we do that, it's not about being woke. It's not about, showing preferences or virtue signaling or how people are going to think about us or any of that. What I want people to really think about and recognize is that when I do that, I ensure that I have more choices in the future. So if I choose to purchase office supplies from a woman-led company, um, I am helping to ensure that 2 years from now, when I want to go purchase more, I actually have choices and it's not just a single vendor or two vendors. And that's good for everyone. So some of this is about making sure that we continue to have a really healthy, strong economy. And part of that is by having consumer options. So everyone can do that. Then, if you are someone who is an accredited investor, there's a particular definition for that, which is both a net worth threshold and an income threshold. You can start investing right away. You can either invest in a fund, which basically invests your money for you, or you can be an angel investor. And there are many, many resources, and we list them at the end of the book and also on the Show the Money Movie website, where you can learn about investing and get support for saying, hey, this is my goal. These are things I care about. Show me how to activate there.
And that's what I love about this movement. It invites everyone to participate, from making intentional purchases with women-led companies to investing to mentoring to advocating for policy changes, or just simply opening doors with introductions. It's about democratizing access to capital, knowledge, and opportunity. And I'm hopeful that this action really triggers a generational change.
I think in closing, I would say we have great data that tells us that if we were to get closer to gender parity, or we were at gender parity in terms of access to capital, we would actually all be better off. So we would be something like our total GDP in the US, for example, would be $4.5 trillion greater than it is right now if we had parity in investing. So this is an everybody problem. This isn't just about something to worry about if you have a daughter, or you're just trying to be a good guy out there, or a woman who says, how can I create more impact? This is an everybody opportunity as well. So I hope everybody thinks about how they can get engaged.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for joining me, Wendy. Remind our listeners how they can get in contact with you and learn more about your work.
Yeah. So my personal website is Ryan.com. So you can learn more about me and about Show Her the Money there. You can also go to the Show Her the Money movie website, which is all one word, just showherthemoneymovie.com. And there's a lot of resources on there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for joining me today. And for all you, thank you for listening. Until next time, remember, it's not what you know, but what you do differently and consistently that makes a difference.